Hi everybody, I'm Lee Cade, and this is VINI. Today we have a special look at DE&I, and if you don't know what DE&I is, you're definitely in the right place. We have two special guests today. First is our talent acquisition and onboarding manager, Raylyn Longhat. Thank you so much for joining us today, Raylyn.
Great. I'm so excited to be here, Lee.
Thank you. And then our other guest is Neelam Chan. She's the founder and CEO of Shift SLC. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
This is very exciting, and this is a topic that I think is so important, but it's something that so many people don't really have a lot of understanding of, and sometimes when it comes up, they might even feel a little defensive about it. So I think it's important that we approach this topic calmly and rationally. But first off, Neelam, what is Shift SLC?
Okay, so Shift SLC is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm here in Salt Lake City, Utah. We are about a year old, but I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work in several different sectors, from nonprofit to higher education to tech startups and financial companies for over a decade. So it was just a matter of me sort of wanting to do this on my own, in my own way. So I started Shift SLC, and it's been a pretty amazing journey since then, since I started a year ago.
I imagine. Now, one of the things that has come up quite a bit from people I know who are native Utahns is that they don't really think that Utah has a diversity or equity problem. And I would say anybody who's lived outside of the state might beg to differ. Do you agree with that, or?
Look, Utah has a diversity, equity, inclusion problem, but so does the rest of the nation. So it's not just Utah specific, but I say that with a caveat that Utah has its own unique issues. We have a religious influence. We're growing in our ethnic and racial diversity demographics rapidly. And so making sure that Utah is keeping up with the pace is going to be very interesting to see this level of growth that perhaps other nations are not necessarily seeing at this pace. So I do think that although everyone is facing a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue, Utah is definitely unique in its own respect.
Absolutely. Now, Raylyn, this was something that came up from a lot of our employees as we felt that we needed to talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity quite a bit in surveys through Pecan. Why did we feel the need that Valley needed to talk with and partner with Shift SLC about this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lee. As you know, we have our DEI initiative that we started, and we've been talking about that in our new employee onboarding experience. We're posting on Slack. You have different areas that we're always talking about DEI, but I think one of the most important things is to have an initiative to work, you have to have action behind it. And so we thought this was the next best step to really look at Valley to gauge where we're at, what areas that we still need to work on, see where we're doing really good, and also get a roadmap for the future. So I just think for Valley, it was the next best step to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable for our staff, for our stakeholders, and most importantly, for our clients as well.
Now, Neelam, what did you do when this partnership started up? Did you have to audit programs? Did you have to talk to people? What did you have to do to check out where Valley's at with our DE&I initiative?
Yeah, so we're not quite there yet, but we're getting into it right now. So we've split it up into a few phases. So right now we are in the assessment phase, where it's exactly what you just said. We're going to be looking at policies and practices. We're going to understand sort of how people are experiencing Valley through an equity lens. We're going to try to understand experiences, sentiments, perspectives. And we're going to gather all of this information comprehensively. And then we're going to figure out what are some of the pain points, what are some of the disparities that haven't been addressed yet that need to be addressed. And then the next phase will be offering a strategic roadmap with areas of focus based off of our findings. So right now we are in the first phase of this, where we're going to do the assessments. Raylyn's going to send me a whole bunch of documents. It's just document galore, but we're going to look at these documents. We're going to scan for biases. We're going to scan for public relation issues. So were promises made, and do those promises still need to be fulfilled? How do we scale back if we need to? How do we move forward if we need to push forward on certain issues or topics? But those are some of the things that we're going to be looking for. And then we're going to really rely on the rest of Valley, so all of its employees, on what those experiences are. So we're going to be asking a whole bunch of people through focus groups, through surveying, through interviews on what people's experiences are on the grounds.
Do you think people are going to be surprised by what you find?
No, I don't think so. I have yet to run into an organization where I have found things that are surprising to them or that it's completely red flags. Usually organizations have a good idea of where they're at the moment. It's a matter of what to do next. Is
Right.
sort of where it's at. So I don't think Raylin and all the leadership folks are going to find anything that's surprising. If anything, it's going to validate and affirm where they believe the organization's at, and then really kind of push things forward.
What have you found from your experience has been one of the areas that a lot of organizations need the most help with, or is this just specific to each organization?
I love this question because I think there's a big misconception on what diversity, equity, inclusion is, and that one size fits all type of thing. Right. It's going to be very unique to the organization. But something that's common that I've found is that there are some misalignment on what needs to be done within an organization. So leadership would believe one thing, management believes another thing, employees believe another thing. So getting that alignment is going to be key. I'm not saying that Valley's at that moment where there's a misalignment. We don't know yet, but I've seen that, and that's been very common in these organizations when we look at diversity, equity, inclusion work. So that's a common thing, but I do think that Valley's going to have its own unique, specific things that we're going to find that may not be the same as other organizations.
What do you foresee us finding, Raylin?
I'm not sure if I foresee us finding anything, but I love how Neelam explained that because I think it's true from different levels from staff to managers to ELT, higher leadership. I think everybody is all working toward the same goal, but they have a different viewpoint that they're looking at. So I'm hoping what this does is kind of bring us all together so we can take our DEI action forward with the same goal.
So I wanted to talk briefly about bias. It seems that bias is the foundation for a lot of the problems we have with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mm-hmm. We all have these biases. I grew up in Southern California, so I have my own biases that I've just recently been made aware of. I know, Raylin, you're from rural Texas, and I'm not sure.
No, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Yeah, so you're from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And so we all have these biases that could come from our families, from our culture, from where we grew up. How does that play into our approach to DE&I?
I think for sure we all have that from where we grow up to the family life that we have to our friend groups to just what was our normal. I think we tend to view everything through ourselves. So that naturally brings up all of these different biases and because I see the world through a certain way. And I think our goal here is to hopefully open our eyes a little bit more and let more in so we can see things differently. But I agree for sure where we're from, what we've done really is like the window that we view everything through.
Yeah, and I agree. I think exactly what Raylin said. So as we think about our environment, our culture, our upbringing, what we consume, so the media, social media, all of these things are readily available. This is internalized in our brain. So we're getting information so quickly from our environment and we're processing them and we're filing them in the back of our heads based off of our own personal experiences. And then we're making decisions based off of those files. And that's where biases come in. So when we think about policies, practices, major organizational decisions, they're done in a way that's so quick based off of our own experiences, based off of our own consumption. So if we don't check those, we don't challenge those, then we're excluding people that are not within this realm of our own biases. We're excluding several groups that may not align with how we view the world. Exactly what Raylin said, just through our own window. Biases kind of creates this us versus them mentality. There's me and then there's everybody else outside of my biases. And everybody else outside can be treated differently because I think what I feel is normal or what I feel is the standard of normalcy is not outside of myself. And so when we think about hiring, when we think about, letting people inside an organization, it's really usually based off of our own biases. How do we relate to this person? If we don't relate to them, then they're excluded. They're not part of this. That's kind of how pervasive bias is. And we need to check it. We need to make sure that we are challenging them as they happen.
I remember when I first broke into the radio industry, one of the big biases that was carried forward from the rock and roll era of the 70s was that a lot of programming managers didn't want to hire women because they didn't want to, in the words of the business at the time. They didn't want that much emotion. They didn't want to deal with that baggage. And what you ended up doing was missing out on some amazing radio personalities that could have brought so much to the table so early. And even now, you won't hear as many women on the radio as you think you should, right? We're dealing with 51% of the population maybe being represented by 13% of the talent on air. And I look at that as an area where we're actually missing out culturally, where there's so many people who have powerful voices and great personalities and incredible stories, and we just don't invite them to the table. Is that the same story here?
Exactly. So, these biases inform stereotypes. They're informed by stereotypes. So when we're making these quick decisions, again, that filing cabinet, the files that we're pulling out of our experiences are so limited. We're not thinking of the whole picture. We're thinking about those things that are being consumed. So when we're talking about women, what is society telling us about women? What is society telling us about Black, Indigenous people of color? What are society telling us about people with LGBTQ backgrounds and people with a disability? And what's society telling us? And that's all we know. It's very laser focused, usually based off stereotypes, usually based off of these discriminatory prejudices. And so that's exactly it. It's exactly how biases can really inform and really change a whole entire organization if it's not in check.
What can a person do? I love when you said to challenge your biases. What can a person do to challenge those biases? Say you live out in West Jordan and your house looks just like every other house and the people in it look pretty much the same and you all go to the same place of worship and you all hang out at the same dinner establishments. What can you do to challenge those biases? Is this comfortable? Can it be a comfortable thing?
It's usually uncomfortable because you're doing something that you typically normally wouldn't do. So it's usually uncomfortable. That's why people don't do it. But even if you don't have people readily available to you that may change your perspectives, we are living in a time where things are readily available in our fingertips through the internet. It's really challenging what you consume, the podcasts you listen to, the books that you read, the authors that you read from, the TV shows that you watch. What you consume, you could really challenge it just in that way and think of something different. Listen to different podcasts that may question and challenge your opinions and your perspectives that you have now. Get yourself uncomfortable and think about it. Slow down your brain, that brain that's working so fast, slow it down and get creative in how you can slow it down. It's not just people, but then also getting involved with the community. Our community, like I mentioned earlier, in Utah, even if you live in South Jordan or if you live in Orem or Provo and maybe it's not super diverse in terms of representation, we're growing. Like you said, our racial and ethnic diverse population is growing rapidly. That means that there's a lot more cultural events going on. There's community efforts being made. And so getting plugged into those are just easy ways to expand your social circle.
For me, how I've been challenging myself is just realizing when someone has a different opinion than me or is different than me. It's easy, our brain immediately based on biases or just even, it's not even biases, but just how we grow up. We have this function in our brain that's like, this is what is, make it make sense. And I think for me, I've been leaning into an opinion if that someone that is different than mine. I've been making myself pause a minute and be like, well, I wonder why they think that way. What's getting them there? I think that is the best thing to do. Like, that's a good way to start reprogramming your brain instead of just being like, oh, this person doesn't agree with me, I'm just done and walking away, is to maybe just have a few checks for yourself. Why am I uncomfortable? Why don't I want to hear their opinion? And these are just little things that you can do, but it really is easy to be like, this is different than me. I don't agree with it. I don't want anything to do with it, and then walk away. But you know what? That won't bring about change unless we can really listen to each other and see what's going on. Like, we're not going to move forward. We're just always going to kind of be stagnant.
Yeah, and stagnant's a place I don't feel comfortable at.
No.
I don't think any of us should. All right, so Neelam, the next step, you're going to be taking on all this information and looking over all of our policies and all these other things. What comes after that?
So then after that is literally us taking time, evaluating, drawing some common themes, and putting together a strategic roadmap for you all. So based off of our findings, we will then determine what are some areas of focus. Where are you focusing now that may be long term and what needs to happen short term. Let's prioritize that. Let's put together a roadmap for you so you know what direction to go based off of what the organization is telling you. So that would be the next step, is to really put this roadmap together. And then the last step is an implementation plan. So tying actions to those areas of focus and not just saying, here are some recommendations, but also here are some ways to activate that recommendation. And then here are also ways to measure it. So you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. You're doing it knowing that we know we have to hit these certain metrics to know that we're successful in this work and that we're growing in this work. That's going to be the most important part. So that is the whole comprehensive approach. But it does take time to understand the organization. I always use the analogy that I'm coming into your home as a stranger and I'm looking through every part of your organization. Ray Lynn's heard me say this many times, but I'm turning over mattresses and I'm looking behind cabinets and I'm literally going to your bathroom. Like I'm looking at, not literally, but I'm looking at all these things.
Going, what's in there? What's behind there?
What's behind there? But I'm looking, and then I'm asking the people who live in your home, how are you experiencing your home? Are you comfortable? What's your day-to-day like? I'm asking all of these things so that I can have a good understanding, not so that I can criticize, not so I can tell you what you're not doing, but to, again, affirm where you've been and where you need to go. That is the whole process.
I remember an organization I worked for about 10 years ago would have benefited greatly from this, because every Cinco de Mayo, they would decorate every person they assumed was from Mexico's desk up as Cinco de Mayo. And, you had people from Chile and Ecuador and Brazil and places that, it's like, cool. It's like going to any Caucasian person's house and congratulating them on the 4th of July, even though they may not be from the United States. So, okay, if people wanted to learn more about this process or about the work that you folks do at Shift SLC, how would they be able to check that out?
Well, I'll tell you on a broader scale, I do have a website, shiftslc.com. So but I know that internally the work that we're going to be doing with Valley, and I'll pass it over to Raylyn because she'll have more of an understanding of internally how everybody's going to know where we are in the process. But we'll do whatever we can to be transparent. I'll do whatever I can to be transparent in my process through Slack channels or whatever else means of communication you have.
Internally, as we go along this process, when Neelam does have stuff to give us, we're going to do our best. Riley and I were going to put it on Slack so we can have a good idea of where we are at this time. And like Neelam said, we will have some focus groups. So there's going to be opportunities for employees to be able to give back opinions or just give feedback. And I think Neelam, if I understand correctly, just wants to gauge where everyone's at and what we're feeling. And we'll put that on Slack when it's time so we can get those who would like to be a part of it and volunteer. So we'll give ample opportunity for everyone to be a part. And we're going to keep up with what we can. As Neelam said, she's in the assessment phase, so it could be quiet for a little bit because it's a lot of stuff she has to go through. So we're working on it, and just keep their eyes on Slack.
Excellent. Well, we're starting to run out of time. I want to give you both the opportunity if you have anything that you wanted to say in conclusion.
I think the only thing I would really say is I know some of the questions that I've been getting when we do post about getting our bias consultant was client facing, and we are definitely going to work on client facing. A good thing that we wanted to start with was ourselves and inside our policies and procedures, because once we get ourselves aligned, it's just naturally going to flow to our stakeholder relationships, our client care, all of that. It's a good way to look at it is the plane and the oxygen mask. Sometimes you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself first so you can better serve and better do what we need to do. It's all coming. I'm so excited, and we'd love questions as well. Like if anyone ever has a question, don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome.
Oh, and then I think what I want to quickly add is I've had the opportunity so far to speak with the leadership team, and I know there's a great big deal of care for this work. Maybe not everybody knows the answer and knows exactly what to do, but there's care and there's intentionality to this already that I just need to let everybody know that you're in good hands. You're not only just with me and my team, but also just with your own leadership team at Valley. It's just there's people are wanting to do this work, and they don't want to just do it through lip service or check off boxes. They truly care, and they truly want to make sure that this work is sustainable.
That's awesome. We're serious. If you have questions, please leave them here in the comments, or you can reach out to Raylyn. I know that she's very busy, but this is something that she's very passionate about, so she'll be happy to answer those questions. And we'll be following up with this throughout the process. So make sure, again, if you have questions, to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that those get answered as quickly as possible. Neelam Chand, Raylyn Longhat, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you all so much.